the people who think that nature's happy out there someplace else don't believe that there's a biodiversity crisis, and have not accepted their responsibility in taking care of the earth. You know, if we're going to own a piece of the earth, it's our responsibility to take care of that piece. You don't have to take care of Africa, but you do have to take care of your little property, because if you don't, who's gonna? And if everybody doesn't, then we talk about that ecosystem collapse. And we're seeing it. We've got global insect decline. We've lost 3 billion breeding birds in the North America in the last 50 years. The biodiversity statistics everywhere are just terrible. So that's why we've got to turn this around, and splitting it up into little bite-sized pieces where all you have to worry about is your little piece of the earth. If you own property, that seemed pretty doable to us. So that's why we have Homegrown National Park.
Doug Tallamy is the T.A. Baker Professor of Agriculture in the Department of Entomology and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Delaware, where he has authored 106 research publications and has taught insect-related courses for 41 years. Chief among his research goals is to better understand the many ways insects interact with plants and how such interactions determine the diversity of animal communities. His book, Bringing Nature Home, was published by Timber Press in 2007. The Living Landscape, co-authored with Rick Darkey, was published in 2014. Nature's Best Hope, a New York Times bestseller, was released in February of 2020, and his latest book, The Nature of Oaks, was released in March 2021. His awards include recognition from the Garden Writers Association, Audubon, the National Wildlife Federation, Western Carolina University, the Garden Club of America, and the American Horticultural Association. Doug lives with his wife, Cindy, on their restored property in Oxford, Pennsylvania. And on his website, he raises the question, what if each American landowner converted half of his or her yard to productive native plant communities? Even moderate success could collectively restore some semblance of ecosystem function to more than 20 million acres of what is now ecological wasteland. So good afternoon, Doug, and it's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you. Very nice to be here.
Okay, so we were kind of talking a little bit about lawns and what people can do to make their space easier to care for and also contribute to the ecosystem.
Okay, well, let's actually back up a little bit and talk about our entire yard, because everything in the yard counts. There are 4 things every yard needs to, 4 ecological goals that we need to pursue if we're going to reach a sustainable relationship with nature, because it is nature that keeps us alive. So having an unsustainable relationship is that's not an option. So every landscape has to support pollinators. Every landscape has to manage the watershed in which it lies. Every landscape has to support a viable food web. So you have to have plants that are going to pass on some of the energy they capture from the sun and support animal life in your yard. And finally, every landscape has to sequester carbon, has to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and tie it up in plants and then pump it into the ground for long-term storage. Lawn does none of those things. So that's why we focus on that. It's a status symbol. It allows us to be neat and tidy, but it is not the path towards ecological sustainability. And we've got 44 million acres of lawn in this country. That's an area bigger than all of New England, dedicated to a status symbol. So, we've got to find another status symbol. We can landscape neatly. So I don't suggest getting rid of lawn. I suggest reducing the area of lawn. The lawn we keep grass is the perfect plant to walk on. You can walk on it without killing it. Very hard to find other substitutes to that. So the lawn we keep should be manicured, and it's a cue for care. It shows our neighbors that we do understand what the culture is. But we've got to get more plants back into our landscape. A third of the carbon that is in the atmosphere right now has come from us chopping down the trees on this planet. So particularly in Staten Island, there were trees there. This is not this is a place that wants trees. So the more trees we can get back into our neighborhoods right away, that's great from a climate change perspective. It's great from a watershed management perspective. And if we choose the right trees, it's great from a biodiversity perspective because they're the big plants that are supporting most of the biodiversity.
Right. So I wanted to talk next about the map on your website, especially it has very colorful. I'm sure that the colors have meaning. I didn't get a chance to investigate it very well, but for people who come to visit it for the first time, what can you kind of tell us about the map and your website and all of that?
Well, we're talking about Homegrown National Park, and the physical nature of the website is the biodiversity map. We want people to, first of all, to join Homegrown National Park is free, but we want you to register your property, the location of your property on the map, and then the amount of area that you're pledging to become a good steward of. And it doesn't matter how much it is, but let's say you really do reduce the area of lawn in half. That's easily measurable. Let's say you plant an oak tree. Let's say that you put a bed under that oak tree. You can measure that. Then your little piece of your county is going to light up using those data, and you get to see how many other people in your county have joined Homegrown National Park. And part of the feature of the map is there's a competitive nature here. The different colors in the states represent the percentage of that population that has joined Homegrown National Park. So dark green is the best, yellow is the worst, and everything in between. And Michelle Alfanderi was my co-founder, and she suggested this, and she said people will want to be competitive about it, and I didn't really believe that. But I think she's right, because I go around and give talks and people say, I see that. I was in Utah. They said, I see Utah is yellow. That's terrible. We've got to get people doing this. So there is a competitive nature here. But the real reason we're trying to get people on the map is to see how we're doing, to be able to measure progress towards this goal of reducing lawn. To see where there are gaps, who's participating the most and who isn't. So where do we have to focus? The biggest feature of Homegrown National Park is to try to find ways to reach the people that don't have a clue that they are an important part of the future of conservation. And that happens to be most people. We call them, the non-choir. It's easy to talk to the choir. They're already on board. They want to help. We can guide them in what to do. But the people who think that nature's happy out there someplace else don't believe that there's a biodiversity crisis and have not accepted their responsibility in taking care of the earth. If we're going to own a piece of the earth, it's our responsibility to take care of that piece. You don't have to take care of Africa, but you do have to take care of your little property, because if you don't, who's gonna? And if everybody doesn't, then we talk about that ecosystem collapse. And we're seeing it. We've got global insect decline. We've lost 3 billion breeding birds in the North America in the last 50 years. The biodiversity statistics everywhere are just terrible. So it's obviously not our what we're doing right now is not working. And of course, the next thing people say, well, I don't even like birds. Why do we need biodiversity? It is other species that run the ecosystems that provide our life support. So you do need it, whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. I liken it to telephone poles. Nobody likes telephone poles. They're ugly, but we don't even see them anymore because we know they're absolutely necessary for our current lifestyle. That's the same as trees. It's the same as the birds that disperse those tree seeds. It's the same as the insects that eat the trees, that feed the birds. It's all absolutely necessary out there to have functioning ecosystems to keep us alive on this planet. And every time we grow, every person we add to the planet, we need more ecosystem services, not fewer. We're going the other direction. So that's why we've got to turn this around. And splitting it up into little bite-sized pieces where all you have to worry about is your little piece of the earth. If you own property, that seemed pretty doable to us. So that's why we have Homegrown National Park.
That's awesome. And actually, there were a couple of things that I thought about while you were talking right there. So some of our readers might remember that we had an article from PETA that basically talked about the birds again, but in a different source of problem for the birds is cats. Cats that people let outside of their houses. kill 2.4, I think the number was 2.4 billion birds every year. I know it was some billion number,
Oh,
and
that's
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that at the time, and I was shocked because everyone keeps their cats outside. Everyone, whether the cats are stray or not.
Yeah. Yeah, they're killing the birds, they're killing the rodents, they're killing the amphibians. That's what cats do. They hunt. It's not their fault. That's what they do, whether or not they're well fed. And an even worse program is the capture, neuter, and release. So you have these feral cat colonies in sensitive places. There's a feral cat colony that people keep bringing cats to at Cape May, New Jersey. That's a migratory stopover point for migrating birds. They're just serving them up to hundreds of cats because we like cats. But it's taking a devastating toll on the birds. We're supposed to like birds too. So it is a pretty easy solution. You keep your cat indoors. And I know, I had a cat. I get it. They like to be out. But actually, if you start them as a kitten and inside, never let them out, they do not miss it. They're happy as clams. So it is a problem. Yeah.
That's interesting because I know one of the problems and one of the reasons why they're doing the spay, neuter, and release is because there's not enough adopters for all the feral cats that are out there. Like, cats are popular, but not that popular. And we're having the same problem with dogs being warehoused in places where they adopt pets and stuff, because nobody, during the pandemic, there was an explosion of everyone wanted a dog and a cat. And then after the pandemic, they started bringing the cats and dogs back. And people obviously have like a moral problem with them just putting them down. But then there's also the problem of letting them go without being adopted. So that's a whole issue in and of itself. And I had no idea about the Cape May thing. That's definitely interesting. And then the thing that you were saying about telephone poles, it was interesting because we actually had, there are some phone poles that are actually dangerous to squirrels and other animals if they aren't maintained properly. They can actually cause the animals to be shocked. It's in rain generally, and they become the short. They become the conductor themselves, and then they get shocked. And then if there's cement below it, they don't survive the fall because it knocks them unconscious. So that's something that's a lot of people don't know about too. That happens with, and also they had been telling us we were learning about all the cats and squirrels and other animals that get run over by cars. So that's another.
And insects.
Right, those two.
Hundreds of millions of insects every year.
And so I wanted to kind of see if we could explore how easy it is to actually make your own garden or your own backyard into a native garden to become a part of supporting the ecosystem.
It's very easy. You simply choose native plants. I can show you pictures of all native gardens that are just gorgeous. You would never know that. I mean, there's this idea that if it's a native garden, it's messy and it's not very pretty. That's just ignorance, or it's poor design. You can make a messy native garden, but you can make a messy non-native garden too. It all depends on how you design it and whether you take care of it. Now, there are a few issues here. The native plant movement is really taking off. People don't want the birds to disappear. They're concerned about biodiversity crisis. They want to help. And when I say you can help, you just have to increase the percentage of natives in your yard. They go out and they try to buy natives. And right now, the demand for natives exceeds the supply. People get frustrated, but that's a business opportunity. Nurserymen are recognizing, okay, we really can sell these plants now. They're starting to carry more of them. More people are going into specialty nurseries with just focus on native plants. So, it's supply and demand, and that usually adjusts itself over a few years. Another shortage is people with the knowledge to install and take care of them. In other words, ecological gardeners. Right now, most of the landscape care is done by lawn care services. The mow, blow, and go guys. They come roaring in and they mow and they leaf blow and they spray something and then they leave. Well, that's a huge industry, and I'd love to retrain them so that they can drive in and install the right plants, not spray, have less to mow. But all these landscapes require maintenance. Nothing's maintenance free, and most people do not garden. They hire somebody. So I want to create that specialty niche of skilled landscapers who can actually do these things. And that is starting to change as well. But we got a long way to go there.
Okay. And also, there was something else in your book that you had mentioned in the Nature's Best Hope book about finding native plants, where you have a database where people can enter in their, I guess, zip code or address, and find the plants that are native to their area.
Right. This is called the Native Plant Finder. It's on the National Wildlife Federation website. And that's exactly what you do. You enter your zip code, and the ranked list of the best woody plant options and herbaceous plant options for your county will pop up, because it changes as you move around the country. So the old excuse of saying, I don't know what is appropriate here, that's just an excuse now. Now you do know what's appropriate. The next challenge is finding those plants. Now, some of them, like the most powerful plant in the country, is one of our species of oaks. And wherever you live that oaks occur, you find an acorn, you plant it. It's free, and it grows pretty fast. I put acorns in my yard when we moved in the year 2000. Actually, it was 2001. Those trees are about 70 feet tall now, and I paid nothing for them, and they're all really healthy and big. So you can build a landscape without spending a whole lot of money. I talk about trees or oaks being the most powerful tree because they support more biodiversity, more other species than any other tree genus. They're large, and they've got they're dense tissues, so they're capturing and storing more carbon than other trees. They've got big root systems, so they're helping the watershed better than other trees. The only thing they don't do all that well is help pollinators, because they're wind pollinated. But the spring bees do go to oak catkins and gather up the pollen. They don't move it to the female flowers of oaks, so they're not actually pollinating, but they are benefiting from oak pollen. So oaks do it all. They produce really valuable leaf litter that puts a blanket on the soil and keeps the moisture in, so that our mycorrhizae don't die, and all of the creatures that eat those leaves turn them over, return the nutrients to the soil so that the tree can use it again. They're all protected by the leaves. They need high humidity. And oak leaves last longer than any other type of leaf litter. So yeah, oaks do it all.
That's awesome. And then as far as oaks, I think you had said something like that oaks are the number one on like the East Coast or something like that. And then there was also goldenrods and some pretty things that people might like if they're in Staten Island and they're looking for a way to beautify their garden. Do you know of any other plants that like the pretty flowers, I guess, that would be suitable?
Right. Our fall asters are, they're gorgeous plants. They're one of the latest blooming things. Goldenrods are number one in terms of supporting both caterpillars and specialist bees. Asters are right there, number two. Evening primrose is very high. Any of the helianthus, any of the perennial sunflowers, they're all ranked very high. If you have goldenrods, asters, and sunflowers in your yard, there are about 44 species of native bees that can reproduce in your yard that won't be able to do that if you don't have those plants. So it's a tremendous boost to our native bee communities, and they need a boost. And you get those pretty flowering plants.
That's awesome. And then there was kind of something else that I noticed that you had mentioned in the book about bee hotels. Because, and the reason I'm asking this is in New York City, they're doing some kind of project where they're putting bee hotels all over the city, and also small ones. I forget what the other second one was. And they're also planting like native flowers around them and stuff like that. So that seems like that's something that would be pretty helpful, except for potential for predators.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. It's the size of the bee hotel that's important. People love bee hotels, and I've got pictures. They make them, with 10,000 holes in them, and it's just a fun project. But when you concentrate all the breeding opportunities in one place, and predators find it or disease finds it, then you've really hit your local bee population very hard. About 70% of our native bee species nest in the ground, but 30% nest in wood or pithy stems, and that's where those bee hotels come in. So you're right, a lot of them that are small and scattered around the landscape, so that if a predator finds one, it doesn't find all of them. You're not putting all your bees in one basket, essentially. But it's a valuable resource. It's a good idea because we don't tolerate coarse woody debris. We don't. If a log falls in our yard, we don't leave it there. Right. That's what the bees used to nest in. So we're now replacing something that they need. And stuff like that works. We saved the bluebird, the eastern bluebird, which in the late 60s and 70s was declining rapidly, simply by putting up bluebird houses. And now we've got bluebird trails. So the public got involved in their conservation, and it worked beautifully. Now bluebirds are one of the most common birds we have, and an awful lot of places. So the bee hotels can help in the same way.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and also something else that you had that I actually was not aware of, like we have blueberry bushes because they're pretty and they make blueberries, and the birds eat them and stuff like that. Usually, we have to take better care of them to get a larger production out of them. But I didn't know that there were actually feeding specialty bees and also attracting native bees, because they'll do both. So like some of the native bees are, I forget what you said the word was, where they go to everything.
They're pollen specialists that can only use the pollen of particular plants, and there's a number on blueberries. Then there's pollen generalists that can go to a number of different types of plants. So for example, the honeybee is the most generalized bee we have. It can go to an awful lot of types of plants. But blueberries require buzz pollination, and honeybees don't do that. Buzz pollination means they go in the flower and they vibrate their thoracic muscles, the ones that they fly with. And it causes the pollen to dislodge and then stick to the body. Bumblebees do that really well. Honeybees don't do it at all. So they go back and forth, and they're using the resources, but they're not spreading pollen very, very well. So yeah, that's a good example of specialist pollinator behavior that allows them to pollinate particular plants. Blueberries also, by the way, support other types of bird food. They make caterpillars. Caterpillars are the meat and potato of terrestrial food webs. And it takes thousands and thousands, about 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to get one clutch of bird to the point where they leave the nest. So you need plants in your yard that are going to support a lot of caterpillars so that you can have a breeding chickadee or a cardinal or titmouse or any of the other things that are out there. 96% of our terrestrial birds rear their young on insects, not on seeds. We think if we put out a bird feeder, we're helping the birds reproduce. Well, you're helping finches and doves reproduce, but that's about it. Everything else requires insects. So.
And as far as the insects, so blueberries host a lot of caterpillars also?
They do.
I guess I just don't notice these things. I guess if I went in and inspected, like, how do you see them? Like, can you see them, or do they eat them so quickly that you wouldn't see them?
Well, at this time of year, they do eat them so quickly. It's very hard to find caterpillars in the spring. But later on, maybe the end of July is a good time to start looking. And also look at night with a flashlight. The caterpillars are hiding from you as best they can because they're hiding from the birds during the day. But at night, they come out and they eat. And that's the best time to look for caterpillars.
Oh, nice. Okay. And you also said before, you kind of covered how easy it is to participate in Homegrown National Park. So what is the requirement? Like, what percentage of your lawn do you have to give to native plants? Is there any minimum requirement or anything like that?
No, there is not. You can put an aster in a flower pot. And a lot of people have very small yards or only balconies, but they still can play a really important role. Picture an apartment complex. No landscape at all, but everybody has a balcony. So I've got a picture of an apartment complex. All the balconies are bare, and then that same one where we've drawn in flowers. You've turned a pile of bricks into an important resource for migrating monarchs or for the local native bees. They will forage there. And I don't care if you're on the 30th floor, they fly up. So yeah, not everybody has 2 or 3 acres to play with, but it doesn't mean they can't be members of Homegrown National Park. No minimum requirement. We are trying to get acreage better landscape, but we're also trying to change the culture. We want people to recognize what the problems are, but what the solutions are and what our roles in those solutions are. Because right now, people, they're upset about the loss of biodiversity, but they think there's nothing one person can do. And that is exactly my message. There's plenty one person can do. You know, something as simple as changing your outdoor lights from white bulbs to yellow bulbs. Yellow bulbs don't attract nocturnal insects, whereas the white ones do. So that simple act can save, you know, over the course of a summer, it can save hundreds of thousands of insects, particularly the moths that make the caterpillars that the birds need to reproduce. So we've got a lot of advice like that, of little things that you can do right in your yard that will help biodiversity a whole lot.
Well, I've actually never heard of that one before, that if you changed your outdoor bulbs from white to yellow, which they actually just installed, I think 2 or 3 summers ago, they installed all bright white LED lights. It looks like daytime on our street.
Yeah. Worst thing they could have done. Worst thing they could have done.
And I mean, there is the darkness behind it, but they are also attracted to the light. And I think that you had mentioned in your book, they have no idea why moths are drawn to white light. They don't know why, they just know that. Like, they know they are, but they don't know really why. And why would they, and the yellow light just doesn't attract them, from what you're saying.
They don't perceive it, and they perceive it a little bit. If you really wanted to go all out, put a red bulb in, because they can't see that at all. And that's true for all the nocturnal animals. They can't see red. But, you know, that would be a red light district for everybody, and I don't see that. There are people that say you should be promoting red bulbs. That's fine, put them in, but the yellow is good enough. So why do they go to lights? A number of hypotheses, and the latest paper went deep into the physiology of it. I don't understand it. I could never explain it to you. If that's correct, it's too complicated to explain. Let's just say they're attracted to lights. Not all of them. It's only about 80% of our insects are attracted to lights, but that's enough to really reduce insect populations.
And it's actually been one of the good things that's happened over the last couple of decades is that those insect stinger lights kind of went out of fashion at some point, at least here. Like, I don't know if they're still in fashion like other places, but in New York City, you don't hear that all night long anymore. The bzzz, that whole thing.
We did a study on that. You know, it's supposed to be killing mosquitoes.
Right. But it actually attracts everyone.
Yeah, the percentage of biting flies that was killed was 0.02%. So, you know, less than 1%. Everything else was a non-target. So it was just, we're going to kill insects because it's fun to kill insects. We've got to change that attitude. As E.O. Wilson told us, insects are the little things that run the world. And if they disappear, so will we. So one of these days, we got to get serious about that.
And if you could go into kind of with the insects being attracted to the light and how they end up dying and how that actually ends up contributing to a loss of insect population.
Well, there's a number of ways, a whole list of ways it kills them. They come flying in and they have got a lot of energy, so they're banging into the light. They can simply, you know, knock themselves silly. They can incinerate themselves if it's a hot light, and many of them are. So they get exhausted, but then they'll let's say they settle down and they're sitting on a wall behind the light. Well, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be out finding a mate and laying eggs someplace, but instead they're sitting there all night. In the morning, birds figure out very quickly where a light is, and if there's moths sitting there, they come and pick them off in the morning, so then they're dead. While they're flying around, if you have a population of bats remaining, they come and pick them off. So there's exhaustion and incineration and, you know, keeping them from doing what they're supposed to be doing, whatever that word is, are the main problems that we have here. And the ones that are attracted the most are moths, and they're the ones laying the eggs, making the caterpillars that run our food web.
Right. And so I guess we kind of covered why someone would want to have some native plants And you had mentioned that one of the reasons to have as many native plants as possible would be to make your own contribution to the ecosystem, right? Something like that.
Well, what's the difference between a native and a non-native? The difference is their ability to interact with the things that need what plants do. Plants capture energy from the sun and they turn it into food. And that is the food that supports all the animal life on the planet, with some very minor exceptions at the bottom of the ocean. So let's just say plants are making all the food. If you don't get that food from the plant to animals, you don't have any animals. And if you don't have any animals, you don't have a functional ecosystem. Well, plants don't want to be eaten. They want to capture the energy from the sun and use it for their own growth and reproduction. So they've protected their leaves with nasty tasting chemicals. So if you were to walk outside right now and eat a plant, you would not like it. There's a reason it's hard to get our kids to eat their vegetables. So most insects cannot eat most plants. They are too well protected. But insects do eat plants. So what they do is they specialize on particular types of plants. They become host plant specialists. And 90% of the insects have a relationship with plants, just like the monarch does with milkweed. Monarchs, that's all they eat is milkweed. And milkweeds are toxic plants. But monarchs have the enzymes that store and excrete and detoxify cardiac glycosides. They have the behaviors that get around the sticky latex sap. Most other insects can't do that, so they can't eat milkweeds. But that is true for 90% of the insects out there. When you bring a non-native plant over from Asia or Europe, but it's typically Asia, that's the ones we love. Our insects have never seen those plants before, so they don't have any of the adaptations necessary to circumvent their defenses. So, you put a Callery pear or Bradford pear in your neighborhood, look at the leaves. There's not going to be any holes in those leaves. Almost nothing can eat that. Nothing can eat the burning bush. Nothing can eat the autumn olive and the buckthorn and the barberry, the things that then escape and become serious invasive species, but they're not contributing the energy they capture from the sun. So that's the problem with non-native plants. Even if it's not invasive, something like a crepe myrtle, it's a beautiful plant, a ginkgo, great ornamental, but nothing eats a ginkgo. So it's not adding any energy to the local food web. So I like to think of plants like that as if they're statues. They're decorating our yard. But when everything's a statue, you don't have a living landscape. And that's why the focus is on native plants.
Oh, and there was something I wanted to ask you about the oak trees. How does someone know if an acorn that they found is one of the best acorns to have, like from the best species of oak tree that would be the best, most supportive of native insect life, I guess, or rather bird life?
Fortunately, all the native oaks are very good. So even if you don't know where that acorn came from, but you will know because it dropped from the tree standing right next to you. If I picked a random acorn up anywhere, it would chance would be very high that it would be a highly productive oak tree. The ones that do not perform very well are our English oaks, the things we bring over from Europe, or Quercus sagittarius, which is the Chinese oak. It supports far less wildlife than does our native oaks. So the real key is planting the oak that's going to do best in the type of soil and conditions you have, because there's oaks that like their feet wet. There's oaks that like high rocky soil. There's oaks that like acidic soil. There's oaks that like basic soil. But again, the easiest way is to find an oak that's doing well and collect its acorns. And you do that in the fall. If it's a member of the white oak group, they germinate right away. So you'd want to put it in a pot or put it in the ground right away. If it's a member of the red oak group, they germinate in the spring. So you can actually store them in the refrigerator over the winter and then plant them in the spring.
That's interesting. And then one second. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is you've been mentioning a lot about birds and their essentiality to the ecosystem. Are there similar, because I know a lot of people don't like squirrels, and they have squirrel baffles and squirrel things that make squirrels dizzy, which just seems so wrong. But are squirrels also essential to the ecosystem?
I would say small mammals are essential. Squirrels are one of the small mammals, and they disperse seeds very well. It is easy in our artificial ecosystems to have too many squirrels because we've gotten rid of the squirrel predators. Now, if you have foxes, and if you have owls, and if you have hawks, it will help keep things in balance. But I think, I don't know, typical Staten Island neighborhood, you may not have all of those predators to keep your squirrel population in check. So we provide a lot of food for the squirrels, and they go crazy. Too many of anything is not good. Another important component would be field mice. Any of our white-footed mice or any of the mice, they're really important components of the food web. I don't talk about them very much because it's just not going to fly. I say, hey, you need more mice in your yard. It's a hard sell saying you need more caterpillars, even though you really do. So I talk about needing more bird food. If you plant that oak tree you planted, it becomes a bird feeder. It's producing a lot of caterpillars that allows your birds to reproduce. And people do like birds. So birds is the hook that I use.
Right, because when the oak tree does produce its acorns, that will support the squirrels and the mice and the chipmunks and all of those other species that we have here.
Well, I primarily talk about oaks because they produce the most caterpillars. They support more than 950 species of caterpillars nationwide. Something like a tulip tree. So in the mid-Atlantic states, and that includes Staten Island, they support 557 species of caterpillars, whereas a tulip tree only supports 21. So there's a huge difference among our native plants. So we do say use natives, but we also say use those keystone natives, the ones that are doing most of the work. Those keystone plants, just 14% of our native plants are supporting 90% of our caterpillars out there. So it's easy. You can actually make a totally native landscape that supports very little, and that's not the goal. We're trying to have balanced trophic levels. So we want the plants, we want the things that eat the plants, but we want the things that eat the things that eat the plants. And most of the things that keep insects under control are other insects. They're insect predators and insect parasitoids. So that's why we don't want to spray, because you kill all the natural enemies first.
Right, because I think we had kind of covered how the predator species reproduce fewer of themselves, whereas the prey species, they go crazy with their reproduction. Like, especially if you take away the predators, like that's why when we have now here in New York City, we do have mosquito spraying every end of summer, which is kind of like when they're done, which just makes no sense, and it's always at night. And they've been actually doing it in the parks in the last number of years, probably the whole time. So, and then of course the problem with that is that kills the dragonflies and the praying mantises and all the other predator bugs. And then the mosquitoes, they reproduce like crazy, whereas the predator bugs can't. And so then by, like, this gets done in, I guess, September, then by October, if it's a hot, like, end of summer like it was last year, you notice that there are at least 3 times as many mosquitoes as there were before they sprayed. Like, or at least it feels that way from all the bites.
It also kills our monarchs. The monarchs don't disappear at night. They're hanging from trees. And I've got pictures of people holding piles of dead monarchs after a mosquito spraying. And particularly in September and October, that's during monarch migration. And excuse me, monarchs are down. You can go to Mexico and count them every year. So we know the size of the population. And this past winter, it's the second smallest it's ever been. The interesting thing about mosquito spraying, and you said it, it doesn't control mosquitoes. You control mosquitoes in the larval stage. If everybody had used mosquito dunks in buckets in their yard, you could control your mosquitoes in a very targeted way. It's cheap. You can get a season's worth of control for $12. It doesn't kill anything else, and that's the major part of it. Whereas mosquito spraying kills a lot of other things without controlling the mosquitoes. So they
kind of backfires every year. And then, so the other thing I wanted to mention also, when you spoke about the oaks, because we've been thinking about the chestnuts a lot, the American chestnut tree, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened to that poor tree that used to have millions and millions and millions, and now there's 10,000 left. And there are scientists trying to figure out, that's kind of like the unforeseen consequence of introduction of foreign plants is what happened to that species of tree. And that was another, like with the oaks, how they're a keystone species, that was another keystone species. And one of the benefits of them is that they produce every year.
That's right.
Like insane amounts.
Yeah, they made chestnuts, and a lot of things depended on it. If we hadn't had oaks around, we would have lost deer, we would have lost our bears, we would have lost our turkeys, we would have lost our blue jays, we would have lost an awful lot of things that could then more heavily use acorns in the fall. But we did lose. There were at least 7 species of moths that went extinct when the chestnut crashed, that we know of. It's probably more than that because nobody was counting them back then. But it was definitely a keystone plant from Maine all the way down to Georgia. And we functionally removed it from our forest so that we could see what Japanese chestnut looks like. Not a good reason. It's just not a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know people, hindsight being 2020, they wish they would have known. And they didn't, it's very sad because you would see there were some pictures of people in the Appalachians who used to gather buckets and then they had nothing within, I think it was within 3 years, or it might have been 10 years, something like that.
Yeah, it collapsed the lumber industry. And it's true, they didn't know, but we know now. And we still import plants. We still move things all over the world. We brought in the emerald ash borer, which has killed literally billions of ashes. We've got several species of oak diseases that we've brought in. We brought in the hemlock woolly adelgid, the beech blight. I mean, we're still at it. So it's because we keep moving things around, and you move the bad guys with them.
Right. And that's actually, there was the lantern flies that they keep talking about, which I could not even tell you if they're anything more than just a new prey bug. Like, because I see other bugs eating them, and I know dragonflies can eat some, like 1,000 or something a day, or some ridiculous number.
It depends on what the lanternfly fed on itself. So if it feeds on ailanthus, which is a non-native plant, then it tastes bad. But if it doesn't feed on ailanthus, it tastes fine. And the predators learn that. So. Right.
Because do we have, ailanthuses are something that is native to here, or we don't have those here?
No. That's the tree that grew in Brooklyn. A tree, that's an ailanthus. We brought it in hundreds of years ago, and you know what it looks like. You've seen it. It's in every crack in every sidewalk. And
right. Oh, okay. And that's what. So if they feed on that, because I know that they also can feed on the tree of heaven or tree of hell, whichever.
That is ailanthus, tree of heaven.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay, and that makes them taste gross.
Yeah.
But if they don't have any of that in their immediate environment, then they're not going to taste gross. And well, that's good that the other insects have figured that out. And are there any seeds that people could put into their bird feeders that would be like higher protein and would kind of help to support that food web in that way as well?
Feeding the birds during the wintertime is a good idea because they don't have access to the amount of seeds they used to have. It depends on the bird. Black oil sunflower seeds are the most universally accepted seed. But smaller birds like our finches, our goldfinches, they really like black Niger thistle seeds. But they'll take the sunflowers as well. If you're going to pick one seed, it should be a sunflower seed. But places like Wild Bird Unlimited and other places are making it very easy for the birds. They've shelled the sunflower seeds, so you can buy shelled sunflowers. It's much more expensive, but boy, the birds love it. They don't have to work hard at all. But in terms of protein amount, I don't really know. I think one of the things that many of our birds don't like a lot is millet. So those little teeny round seeds that are mixed in, that's kind of filler. And the first thing they do is they fish all over the place. And so I would avoid that. Some of the birds eat it, but most of them don't.
Right. On Staten Island, we have a lot of sparrows, and the sparrows like millet, so I guess that the mixes, they do pretty well for that.
English sparrow, which is really a finch, and another one that doesn't belong here. So,
all right. And then you also mentioned about how people without backyards can participate. And the building that you had mentioned, did they actually convert that into balconies with plants, or that was just like a guide?
this is just a suggestion on our part. I saw an apartment complex in Ashland, North Carolina, and I didn't have my camera with me, but it was a perfect example. Every balcony was overflowing with greenery. And so that was a lost opportunity. I haven't seen too many other than that. But this is new. People are just learning. They're learning they have a responsibility. They're learning how to exercise that responsibility. They're learning that it's fun when they do, and that they can feel good about it. But, we're talking about really just a few months that we've really been pushing this. So most people never heard anything about it. So it's going to be a while. We're talking about changing the culture, and that takes some time.
And so I know gardening is something that people like to do with their kids, and kids really like to do that too. And when you were so as far as on balconies, I'm assuming that you're meaning like container plants?
Yes, container. Yes, they're not just putting the plants in dirt on the balcony. Oh, and so what plants should you put in your containers? If you go to our website, homegrownnationalpark.org, there is a section of that website that tells you exactly which native plants are good for containers in your ecoregion. So again, that changes as you move around the country. But that's very helpful, because otherwise people say, well, what plants will do well in a container? It's a good question, because not all of them do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Go to that website and get that information.
Awesome. And are you aware of, with regard to the native plants, are you aware of any natural ways to prevent plant diseases or increase beneficial insects that would consume plant predators, stuff like that?
Well, this is where diversity comes in. The greater the diversity of native plants you have in your yard, the more players are going to be in your system, and that includes the natural enemies of those players. A very simple ecosystem is the one that's most fragile. It's the easiest to upset. So increase the diversity of native plants in your yard. Make sure you don't kill the things that need those plants. So this is where the mosquito fogging comes in. If you have the option of opting out, it makes no sense for us to be building native bee populations and helping the monarch and helping the birds and the caterpillars and everything else, and then kill them all with a mosquito spray. It just makes no sense at all. So I don't know, try to end that, or keep them away from your yard, and certainly don't spray yourself. A lot of your lawn care people come in and they're spraying fertilizers and pesticides on your lawn by the calendar for no reason. Well, the reason is they get to charge you for it. So you could say, all right, you can take me around my yard, but this is what you're not going to do. And if you don't want to do that, you're fired. I'll hire somebody who will. But if you keep the toxins out of your yard, put in the diversity of plants that used to be there. I mean, it won't be close to what used to be there, but you can really shift it in that direction. You will see life come back to your yard in ways you'd never even imagine.
And then for people who have managed to support monarch populations, is there any way that they can protect them if their county or community does the spraying?
A lot of places do have opt-out programs where they know they're not allowed to spray near your yard, and sometimes it includes a house on either side of your house. So it depends on who's doing the spraying. If it's the county, if it's your local administration, you have to see what the rules are. But we need enough pressure with the facts. They mosquito fogging companies advertise that what we're fogging is a natural organic substance. And it is. It's pyrethroids. It's made by chrysanthemums. It's natural and organic. But cyanide is natural and organic. Ricin is natural and organic. Nicotine is natural and organic. Being natural and organic means nothing. It's marketing because it makes it sound like it's warm and fuzzy, and it's not going to hurt anything. And then they also say it only kills mosquitoes. That's the part we got to fight. They've got to advertise accurately, say kills all your pollinators, kills all your monarchs, kills everything it comes in contact with, but not enough mosquitoes to actually control them. So then you can decide whether you want to hire these guys.
Right. So if they were actually had to like do truth in advertising and stuff like that.
I mean, I thought that was this. I thought there were rules about that.
So did I. But that's interesting because pyrethroids are, I think they're the neurotoxin, and they kill every insect.
Every insect you come in contact with, yeah, sure. How can you kill mosquitoes and not something else?
I guess I don't know, like people really don't like mosquitoes, which makes sense.
I get that. Yeah.
The best way to prevent mosquitoes bites on yourself is like citronella candles work really well, or even spraying yourself with essential oils that repel mosquitoes, and then they won't land on you and sting you.
You know what else works is a fan. You put that on your picnic table, turn it on, and it's a directed breeze. You can sit there, enjoy your cocktail, and the mosquitoes don't fly into it. But really, don't give up on the larval control. If everybody had a bucket with mosquito dunks in action all summer long, you'd put a terrible hit on that mosquito population without killing anything else. It's easy. It's so easy.
Right. All right, so that was kind of everything that I wanted to cover. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to add?
Oh, we did a pretty good job, but I always like to go back to personal responsibility, to emphasize to people that the old idea of humans and nature not being able to coexist is, we've got to toss that out the window, because the only path forward, there's not enough places where there aren't people to save enough of the nature that we need. So we need to now coexist. It's perfectly, it's a natural thing to do. We're part of nature. We're products of nature. And it's, again, if we're going to own a piece of the earth, it is our responsibility to managing that piece in a way that supports the nature that we all need. And that's a brand new idea, because people used to think it's just in the parks and that's all we need. It's not enough, not enough.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, and we really learned a lot, and I hope that our readers also will learn a lot today from watching this as well.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.